Good day. It's midday. Good. Hi, everyone. I'm Ongezwa Mbele. I'll be your host today. Welcome to the third day of Poetry Africa, the third edition, the 23rd edition. Okay, so today we're going to do things a bit differently. We've got a book launch, which I'll be hosting. The book is titled Shading Poetry by Africa S. Dlamini. And then at 1:30, we're going to have a pre-book launch of a book titled The Frightened by Lethokuhle Msimang, moderated by Stacey Hardy. Okay, the Poetry Africa 23rd edition festival has been made possible by the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and we'd like to acknowledge and thank the following funders: the National Institute for Humanities and Social Science, French Institute of South Africa, Total Energies, and KwaZulu-Natal Department of Arts and Culture. Oh, it's the 25th edition, not the 23rd. I don't know why I'm on 23rd, because it's the third day of Poetry Africa. Okay, Africa, can you just please let us know who you are and where you're from?
All right, sure. Good day, everyone. My name is Africa. I don't know why I always have to. I always feel like I have to clarify this one. It's an actual real name. So my name is Africa Dlamini. I'm from Emevano in Howick, a small town in Pietermaritzburg. 31 years of age. I think, yeah, that's all.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm the author of the book.
Thank you for that introduction, Africa. I'm just gonna ask you to read a poem which embellishes your introduction, and it's titled The Covenant with Times. It's on page 55 of your book, Shading Poetry chapbook.
All right. Covenant with Time. Okay, I'll read through it. I am the author of legacies and chronicles, the orator who sits in keen spectacle. I molded the stone with which formidable kingdoms are built, and witnessed empires crumble to the pits of their complacence. I have raised noble men to the ascendant of their glory, and I have watched the men fall to the demise of their folly illusions. I am indifferent, cannot be bent to man-made laws. O statues of Ozymandias, you too shall be desecrated and left stranded in the vast desert of time, where the echoes of your words will resound not more than your deeds. Just to clarify a bit on the poem, it's basically the idea that in existence, what is our agreement? What is our covenant with time? So what if you have a certain lifespan, if you have 30 years to live, what is your agreement with that span? What do you want to do with it? And in most cases, the one thing that comes out even more is the idea that whatever you do in the space, one thing that will live out more or that will resound through time is your deeds more than your words. So that's basically the crux of the poem, is that the one covenant with time that we have is our deeds. It should be of service one way or the other, whether to nature, to human development, to human growth, whatever it is, there is a certain covenant with time that we make. And for me, or in my perception, it is the one where you try and live through your deeds and less by your words. So that's that's basically the crux of the poem.
Thank you for your words, and thank you for serving us with your words at this point. And you proclaim that you're an author, and
I believe I am.
and that's beautiful, to know yourself. So tell us about the journey of compiling this book.
Right. Initially, the idea was for me to write a series of 7 poems. It's mostly the poems you find in the first chapter. So those poems were the core, the plan of the book. And the first chapter is just about shedding, right? It's more personal than the other chapters. And so that's where the journey started, was for me to write a series of poems where I can shed off certain emotions that I otherwise would not do or did not do before. So those poems, they basically about the relationship I have with my mother, the relationship I have with my father, and his relationship he had with his own mother. It has poems about the relationship I have with my hometown. It has one I have with my siblings, and it has one I have with my family as well. So it's a body of work that basically it's just me shedding off certain emotions or certain ways that I feel about these aspects or these relationships in my life and how they've affected me. So that was the initial plan of the book. And then obviously as time progresses, the book it begins to find its own voice, and you add other poems which resonate with the concept. So if you look at chapter 2, it's about healing of finding self or something like that. So that's an inward looking into self, and also again diverging these things that I would not rather diverge in poems the previous times I wrote. And the third chapter is all about purging. It's about cleansing yourself again. So it all goes back to that idea of I'm just discharging whatever it is. I'm discharging it, and that's been the process of the whole book. And yeah, I think that sums it up. The expression of it and it coming into an actual project. It started from that point of, or that purpose of trying to shed off or heal from whatever that I thought I needed to heal from at that time.
Thank you for that. We'll go to the first chapter, and I would like you to read The Wounded Man. It's quite an opening. It's on page 10 of your book. And you start the book with this poem. So after reading, please let us know why you felt the need to have this poem as an opening.
Of course. A wounded man. A wounded man is a beast that, unbeknownst to itself, seeks healing by wounding others. His scars run deep and down the spine of his stunted childhood, up the navel of his hollow manhood. They spew in a rage of long dried blood clots. They fester in appalling violence and bask in all the collected rot, becoming indelible blemishes on the very fabric of society. So one of the reasons that compelled me to write these 7 poems that I initially talked about was for me to heal the boy inside me, the boy child inside me. Because it's about that. It's about a broken man who's trying to find healing in different ways. But it's not just me as an individual man. I'm also exploring the generality of things that go wrong with men in general in our country, in particular. So one of the things that over years, and it's a reason why this book is out, over years I have examined that one of the reasons why we have so many broken men in our country, who then go on as a consequence, who go on to find healing by hurting others, right? And as a consequence of that, they just become, as I've explained it, they become these permanent marks or these permanent stains on the fabric of society. It's because the brokenness in those men, it starts from the relationship they have with their mothers. I strongly hold this belief, Ongezwa, that a boy child is only developed into a man only through the influence of his mother. Once that is compromised, then you will have a series of events which will display the brokenness of the boy child in that man that seeks healing. So for me, if a man decides to insult a lady passing by just because she did not give him the time of day, for me, I just see the boy child in him screaming out. Or the fact that the girl did not or refused to give that boy or that man her attention, and the fact that the man needed to or felt the need to act or to insult in return or as a response, for me it speaks to that insecure boy child inside, the one that was never healed, the one that never got sufficient attention from his mother, the first woman who's supposed to love a boy child, the first woman who's supposed to love the boy child, affirm the boy child, is the mother. Beyond that point, it can be the mother, but the point is it has to be a female presence or a maternal figure of some sort. It has to be either a mother or a grandmother. Most men, not boys, most men I've encountered in my life have stronger backbones, and they all attribute it to their mothers. That's what I've learned in my collection of 31 years in existing, and my personal issues with my mother, because we had a very, very, estranged relationship, for the lack of a better term, with my mother. And all these things I wrote in this book comes from that. It comes from that outcry as a man, that, man, the boy child in me is really damaged. And this is because of the relationship I had with my mother from the young ages of the teenage phase. So that is my belief. I hold a strong belief through this book and a series of other books that I'm yet to write. They are all just trying to tackle the man problem. The man problem. Since we have this prevalent issue of broken men in South Africa who display this in a myriad of damaging ways, that has become my assignment. What is wrong with the man? And most people may look at this and think I'm pointing a finger somewhere. No. It's an outcry. It should serve as an outcry that I am noticing something that most men don't cry about, their relationship with their mothers. And I can connect it to a range of things, even the most specifically patriarchal men we know, or patriarchal artists we know, Java. The one song that resonates with everyone is the one about his mother. The one song, pretty much all male singers, or most songs which are attributed to mothers, are sang mostly by male singers. Boys to Men, Mama, Tupac, Dear Mama, Eminem.
Okay, so I will stop you there a bit, because this book is dedicated to your mother, and I want you to read page 28 which is called shading. So we can understand your complexities. I mean, I don't know if it's complex. Understand these claims that you make.
Yes. All right. Thank you for stopping in my tracks there. I can go on and on about this topic.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right, here it goes. Dear mother, I have found a fountain of wisdom in my backyard. I know not yet how to make it run. At times I wonder, did it all happen right past in front of you, or did you work hard at suppressing memory? I wonder what reflections of yourself you see in me. Do you ever hear the screams of my longing in a pit of a well that gives nothing but takes from the rain? Does it ever set you aback how your child drowns himself in such abandonment? I keep patching my childhood flaws with quicksand, because in all my becoming, in all my attempts at taming my galloping emotions, in all the relationships I have hopelessly tarnished, mother, I searched for you, but you never spoke yourself to. One is never meant to grow like some invasive weed in the wilderness. What hollow man you maketh from a boyhood void of motherly counsel? What man cries to be cradled back to nursery innocence? I am not one to lament over spilled infancy milk, nor the times you could have ceased to speak some life into mother. I lament for the festering wounds that remain gaping. I lament for the absurd amount of time it takes to heal them. And lest I be proud of my childhood scars, mother, I lament for your grandchildren and for comfort. Between a mother and her child, forgiveness is but umbilical. So let us speak of healing. Let us speak of things you would rather divulge on your deathbed. Mother, closure was never a garment worn for comfortable occasions. Mindful of your graceful aging, a totem of a persistent lineage with chiseled cheekbones, life wears down our parents slowly right before our eyes. A mystery even to you, how you've passed on your strength even to strands of your hair. And my sisters and their unknowing laughter is an erupting volcano, and your back is a vast landscape the carelessness of their youth will spill on. You, a hybrid of the now and then, a lighthouse to our restless shores. Yet you shed not a glimpse of light to the pain you harbor. Oh, mother, you wear your sadness like it's a second scent, a salty residue that has coated your skin, the cloak of shame on your shoulders. Undo yourself of it. Your womb is still a temple, and your offsprings still in much need of your prayers. Tall giants are still destined to stand on your shoulders, your grandchildren, seated at your well-journeyed feet, the purity of truth in life form, eager to gulp from the fountain of your wisdom. Now let them not grow contempt for their grandmother, for all the things you left at the back of your throat, with no intention to either swallow them or speak them to us. For all those things have haunted us as much as they will haunt them.
Thank you for your vulnerability about your relationship with your mother. I think what the book does well for you is you start to, for you, that we start to understand your estrangement with your mother. And I think we must be mindful that that you talk about in your book is the same as for this crisis that we find ourselves in with regards to men. So just wanted to say that. What I also wanted to go into is, because we don't have much time, where do we find Shedding Poetry chapbook? Can you just show us the cover?
Oh yeah. It is. I mean, it's that concept of, you know, the boy child. Like the idea that the man is shedding for the boy child to heal. So that's the whole concept of the book cover.
Okay.
Is that there's certain things that a man has to shed. So this book at the moment, you can only order it from me. So you can contact me on my number 067 085 1900. That is 067 085 1900, and you can order your own copy and purchase it that way, or you can just find me on Facebook, which is Africa Siboniso Dlamini, and we can talk from there.
How much is the book?
Oh, it's 200 rands per piece or a copy.
Okay, thank you. We've got one comment or question. Oh, there's a lot coming now. Okay. Which is beautiful. It's from Lindelwa Dlamini. Do male circles have these conversations? As women, I feel we've come to a point where with enough wine and safe space, we open our father's wounds with each other and we grow from it. Yes, we've also got another comment, so you have to be quite short, and we've got 5 minutes. Thank you so much for your comment.
We do, but they do not dive into the depth of things. There's a certain level of vulnerability we allow and then pull back. But men do have this conversation in their circles. They just do not dive deeper into the actual reasons. So if I do talk to a man and they have mother issues, they'll find themselves opening up, but also they hold back. So we do, it's just that we do not connect it all the way to the source.
Okay. Ukwazi K says Africa Siboniso Dlamini should present talks about boy child already. Shedding is leading us somewhere already. So there's a call for you to hold workshops and engagement with regards to this topic. On that note, because I feel your mother was centered so much, but you also write about your father, and it's but you have to read it quickly, right? Not quickly because we don't have time. It's like I'm multitasking.
I'm worried of time.
Read like maybe the first few lines.
Of course.
Yeah. So you don't read the whole poem. Thank you.
Of course. Can I just select a couple of lines that I would like to read?
Okay. You lead us. Right.
So because it will highlight it will go back to the same thing that I'm talking about.
Okay.
I will start from where it says, okay. My father was a simple man, a two sides to a coin kind of man. And I am yet to meet anyone who can adjust with such ease to the piling weight of his grudges, just as long as he keeps them. So what gives in this world to men who live on bent backs and battered souls, sheltered by a falling home? Far from me to bite my tongue, a part of me blames my grandmother. She was tough as nails on coffined secrets. On her deathbed, she played refusing my father's redemption. And so after his mother's passing, I grew to watch my father rock himself to sleep, tossing. I'll just stop there.
Thank you.
There's a reason why I wanted to highlight that part. Is because, again, it draws back to the issue of boy child. Is that I watched my father until well into his 40s. complaining about the relationship he had with his mother, or lack thereof. Because that's when it clicked to me that he was going through the same things with his mother that I am. And his level of brokenness is just, I cannot even begin to describe it at the moment. But I saw that pattern, that it was a longing from a man to his mother that was always there in him. So again, you find that idea of the broken boy child that needs healing.
So when do men take responsibility of their hurt? That statement, hurt people hurt people. So when is the responsibility? When is that?
Unfortunately,
Busi says, congratulations on your book, Africa. Can't wait to get my signed copy.
Oh, thank you. So unfortunately on that question is that men have the privilege of, they have a societal privilege where they do not have, like, again, one of the reasons why men do not dive deeper into themselves and really, really examine their issues is that they have a privilege that they do not have to. They have that privilege. Because why? They can just keep on bleeding onto others. That's how they eventually become these permanent stains on our societal fabric, is that they have the privilege to not be accountable for most things. But at what point does it become a personal responsibility thing? The moment you realize you are broken, and in what ways. For as long as you think it's still okay, there is very little self-accountability. In that sense, or in that disguise, you can go very comfortably well through your years as a man, casting blame to others. So the idea of self-accountability, to answer that in a summarized way, begins once you realize that as a man, you are broken, and in what ways. Beyond that, and you have to admit to it, you have to sit down with yourself and be honest that you as a man, you have these kinds of deficiencies. I call them deficiencies. And those things, you have to really, really be honest, brutally with yourself. Okay? Because of these broken issues, I have a terrible way of communicating in relationships. I have a terrible way of humbling myself and being able to apologize. I have a terrible, once you actually absorb that without any defense walls, then you're on your way of accountability and ultimately healing.
Thank you, Africa, for your words. Introspection is needed with regards to toxic masculinity and the crisis that we find ourselves in. You have reflected on your personal journeys of how you need to go through a healing journey and the book is called Shedding Poetry Chapbook. There has been a call for you to host more workshops and start the conversation. So please do that. I will end there. And thank you for this time. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. We are now going through to the pre-launch of The Frightened, a book titled The Frightened by Lethokuhle Msimang, and will be moderated by Stacey Hardy.
All right. Thank you so much, Ongezwa, for your reception.
Thank you. And bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much for the previous session and welcome to this next session. I'm very, very thrilled and excited to be here with Lethu and to be talking about a book that's been long coming and that I think from my personal perspective is quite revolutionary in terms of South African writing. Before I get going, many of you will probably know Lethu as a poet. She has a long history of publishing in poetry. She has an anthology out. She has spoken at festivals and published in journals as a poet. But this book is something slightly different. And this session is something of an anomaly in that what we have is a pre-launch. What the hell is a pre-book launch? And we also have a book that's presented as a semi-autobiographical novel appearing at a poetry festival. But I'm hoping that as we move through the session, and as you hear Lethu, you'll understand the relevance of both maybe doing an introduction to this book before it's actually come out in the world, because it will be published later in the year, but it's just not available yet for this time. However, we're very grateful that Poetry Africa seized us up and said, okay, let's do it anyway, because it's an important book. And hopefully its relevance within this festival and its place within this festival will become clearer as more than just that Lethu has a legacy of being a poet and is known as a poet. To just explain very briefly about how we'll just the next half hour will work, I'm going to ask Lethu to read for the first 10 minutes or so, so that you can get a feel of the work, hear its textures, hear its voice, hear its music, and then we'll go into a short Q&A where I'll be asking Lethu some of the questions I have and the burning questions I have, and then finally we are hoping to get some feedback and some responses and some questions from those who are listening. So if you are listening on social media, please at any point feel free to type your questions into the chat on social media. We will get to them most definitely. I'm a great believer that we want your voices in this as much as our voice, and I'm certainly as interested in your questions as any questions I have to ask. So please at any point, and please do have your questions ready and think of them for the last 10 minutes, because we'll open it up and I'll hand Lethu over to you. But Lethu, first let me hand over to you and ask you to maybe read from this extraordinary novella, just to give a bit of background that it will be coming out through Impepo Press later in the year. So the reason this is called a pre-launch is that it's really, you're very lucky as audience. It's the first time I think this book has really been read in public. And you'll get to preview it, and the book will be coming out through Impepo Press later in the year, and we're enormously excited for that. But for now, to hand over to Lethu, who will be reading to us from a beautiful new semi-autobiographical novel called The Frightened.
Thank you, Stacey, for that really wonderful introduction. I actually won't waste any time saying any more about myself. Just to say that what I'll be reading is, I'll read from the beginning of the book, and then I'll just take some small sections from different chapters, just to give you an idea of what the book will be like. It is very fragmented, so it won't feel jarring to hear a reading this way. I want to start with the first chapter called The Frightened. Sorry, The Madness. I mourned you. I mourned like a screaming child. I wrapped myself in brown blankets and woke up drenched in sweat when it wasn't enough to cry, when I had to drink myself into a drunken stupor until my eyes changed color, that unfading yellow, as if my home were in a dust bowl and I were too proud to leave. And then I went mad. I let the sleeves from my dress blow off my shoulders as I ran half naked through a breeze. That night it would rain, and I would threaten to kill myself if it meant that I could sleep again, or that I could unfuck the men that had ruined me. The therapist recommended Mrs. Dalloway, where I read that madness is simply a loss of proportion. And in my case, I felt, as I imagined Virginia Woolf concede, that this was certainly a disproportionate response to sudden pain, but at its core lay something frightening and far more challenging to repair. I was simply no longer a child, and the ground was not solid, and the Eastern Cape was barren and poor, and I didn't have a driver's license. To witness true poverty when you know what it's like to live easily is something very hard to come to terms with. I felt in this moment so far away from you, so far below, and most incapable of reaching. I'm sure you weren't aware that I could grovel, that I could crawl beneath a can of worms and curse myself, and still curse myself for being unable to crawl. Sorry, let me start again. I'm sure you weren't aware that I could grovel, that I could crawl beneath a can of worms and still curse myself for being unable to slide below the earth on my belly. You must have simply thought I was slender, the slim daughter of a rich man. The thought alone is enough to think that I am conceited. But I think of you instead of all the men who've lain on top of me, instead of being held down on my knees, wrist aching, where there was wetness and there was pain, instead of the short list of shame that has sampled my amplitude. I think of you who wanted nothing, not by force or labor. I had to puke the wine out of my belly, to fold my knees into my stomach to learn that there was something impure in the way I felt. There were needles in my arm, a drip to save my liver, and being as I was, there. You did nothing, to do nothing, to fold one's arms and do nothing, to float in a swimming pool and cup your ears to hear the ocean, to dive into a body of water and rise as if to be reborn. To do nothing is to do a lot. What did you do when I was dying? Sometimes I think of him walking, away down and into the subway. I think of him moving back for the fear that I might kiss him. I worry sometimes that I repulse him, that somehow I've hurt him deeply, that there is a reason he recoils at my touch. Still, I wonder whether he knows that I know that he's behaving this way because his penis is small. I didn't mind that it was small, but when we made love, I felt nothing, something of a strange irony. It felt good to feel nothing for a change. It beat the unending fall of feeling, the nagging fear of being let down, and how I miss him, his skin tone like fading gold, hands fisted on his knees, a sort of finished form designed to restore you. He looked a little like my brother, the one my father loves best. They are alike in many ways, my father and him. I must have a reason in order to speak with them. My father was the first man to break my heart. Men love in order of proximity. The children of his wife would be the ones he loved best. The rest is a kind of discipline. And I've grown to admire men of principle. They are distinct and they make progress. But through grace, I've met a man who can pray. I know that may not mean much these days, but it tells me a lot about how he was raised. When I threw my insides out on the bathroom floor, he said that he was praying for me. He wanted me to be well, to relieve my fears of the future. I'm ill-equipped to deal with this world, I told him. My mother coddles me like a child. She says this thing inside me is dangerous. She is prepared to help at any cost. I want to read just 2 stanzas from a chapter called The Body, and then I'll read a little bit more from other chapters. I know it's a bit dense, but please bear with me. The Body. If you don't understand how I feel, try to imagine yourself in your mother's womb, without contemplation, without exposure, in your first position. Remember what it's like to belong to yourself, to imagine life before you've lived it. Do you recall your father's first embrace, the first stranger to whom you belonged? Do you remember looking up to your brother, throwing away one boot because he'd lost his, soldiering through the living room in bathrobes with rubber swords in one shoe? Do you remember the first time you saw your grandmother slaughter a chicken? Do you remember being asked to bathe in its blood? Or the first time you heard a song and mimicked its register and learned for the first time that you could sing? Do you remember the day you met your half-brothers and found that they were the same age as you? Or the first time you learned that love was friction, that to rub your parts against the pillow, a woman or a man would cause the same reaction? I was once so insulated, so protected and warm, yet my first reaction to love was violent. I screamed, "What are you looking at?" to the boy who couldn't help his gaze. He looked at me with so much love, it provoked my disdain. Love wants to touch you. Love wants to pull a child out from its mother's womb, to pierce your soft parts and demand courage from you. Love accustoms you to the vulgarity of men. It is from the wetness, the endless thrusting, the bloody months and bloated belly that I found myself curled in my first position. Love made a woman of me too soon, and I killed my child. I killed my child. I killed my child. And then the weeks of blood, bloated belly, soft stool and swollen breasts, Moods swing like coastal winds, sponges drenched in old blood and mucus. We women and our leaking bodies, so much time taken up on our aches and pains. I heard James Joyce had a wife who was constantly bleeding. She'd bleed in her skirts and in their sheets, their marriage dampened with the metallic scent of fresh blood. He must have been a liberal, I deduced. These are early signs of a mingled mind. I hear the first sign of an uptight person is the fear of contamination. I thought, perhaps that upward bookworm couldn't drink from the same cup as me, or the stud who replaced a hug with a handshake. Perhaps they were all conservative. Better a bleeding wife and bloody sheets. Because you have to betray yourself to be uptight as a woman. You have to betray your body. You have to say, I don't fuck and I don't bleed, that my nipples don't tingle when he slaps me. And still, I wonder if I'm afraid of men or if I'm just afraid of getting stuck in the kitchen. I feel misplaced standing there, scrambling an egg. I feel the sudden urge to change my accent or to gesture the pristine of a Californian kale eater. I want to say that I love coconut water. I want to slice an avocado for a snack. I want to wear a watch which dangles off my neck. I want to say that it was once my grandfather's. And in my bag must be a camera so that I might photograph the food that I prepare. A nice vegetarian dish, Swiss rolls. I'd like to poach an egg instead of scrambling it. So I'll just read probably 2 more little paragraphs. I want to read one from Web of Lies and another from a chapter called My Father. So Web of Lies. I've spun a web of lies. The first, I think, was to catch a fly, to cling to his ends as he took flight, like all men of might who aren't weighed down by things which weigh. I saw him shake the hand of the president. I saw him grow a beard, carve a mustache. I saw him hold a job, a driver's license. I tried to reach for him up there. My fear, I think, was to be earthbound, to be solemn, to be below when everything was above, that no good cause would bring him back to me, no apology, no sudden beauty, no folded arms of feigned indifference, no better man who finished book. So I lied. I spun a web of lies. I said an old man had tried to rape me, that everyone there had laughed about it. I said he'd held me down on my knees, that he scraped my cheek with his belt buckle. I wanted to remind him that I was desirable, that I was helpless, and I needed his help. At the time, I would rather have suffered his pity than to endure his indifference. He once wished me well when we went our separate ways. I imagined he thought it would be painless, or that perhaps with time, my tiny pain would go away. But I sat on the grass in my old home and prayed. I sat praying an empty prayer when I knew no perfect God would change my face. I was no longer a thing of wondering grace, that he would never pursue to touch me. I am despicable. I know. God knows. Lastly, I think I'll read something shorter. It's from the Catalonian, a chapter called The Catalonian. It's really short. What moments are forming you? Is it the strength of a hand over your head, forcing you to kneel? The spear of a man jabbing at the back of your throat? Is it your tears on a heap of soil you've tasked yourself to swallow? How you've developed a taste for licking stones, keys, the marrow of a drumstick, the cement of the floor? Is it the men or the madness or the silence on the other end of the phone? What forces your head into a pillow? What causes you to scream, to tire, to kneel, to scale the weight of a life? Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Leto. I think we all need to breathe for a second. But I think that one of the things that really come through in the reading, I think there are 2 things, and maybe I'll start with the first. The one thing is the bravery and the fearlessness of the writing, but also its incredible vulnerability. And then stylistically, that I think while it is a prose work, it is a work that is full of poetry. And that is full of imagery, metaphors. The language is very poetic. It has a musicality to it. You certainly use rhythm and other kind of poetic techniques in it. And also then this use of the fragmentary form. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what you see as a relationship between your prose writing and poetry, and why this particular material required that kind of language, that you were almost compelled to use a poetic language to speak to the contents of this book, or the material and the issues you address in this book. And then also the fragmentary form, why that was necessary also in terms of the content, but also the process in writing this book, how that form came about from the process.
Yeah, that's actually a very the fragmentary form, especially in relation to poetry, was that I was very used to writing shorter things, and I always wanted to veer into poetry because it gave me room to just elongate my sentences, and also just I feel this a certain rigidity that poetry has based on, you know, its ancient form. And so I think what happened was I veered towards prose poetry. And in writing this book, I wrote it in the midst of a depression and just feeling fragmented myself, and the words weren't coming out the way I wanted them to. I really wanted it to flow seamlessly and just to be long and like one page flow into another, like a beautiful prose piece, but it just wasn't coming together like that. It was just broken because I was broken. And so I think usually writing is a very reflective thing. You usually do it when you're past the moment and you're kind of reflecting back on it. It was very strange to be doing something, writing about something as you're experiencing it. And I think the fragmented aspect of the book reflects the state of mind I was in when I was writing it. Stacey, you're on mute.
Sorry. Maybe if you can talk just very briefly about, it's a book that's been written over a long period of time. It's a very small book, but and as you say, a book that was written, you know, in many ways, it's a book that's testimony to a coming through slaughter, to a living through depression, to a surviving it. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about, there's a cliche of talking about the relationship between writing and depression. And I know very often within a sense, when one is in a depressive state, the writing is the most difficult thing to do. How did you use writing throughout your suffering with mental illness? What do you see the relationship as? And how did you manage to come out of that and produce a book on the other side?
I think, in fact, probably this answer involves you, because I remember the first time I heard you speak. It was at Rhodes at my orientation, and you said, what we want is for you to write towards your pain. And at that time, I felt a little bit apprehensive to do that. It's something I've always lived my life very considered about how I appear. I've always been very guarded. And so I wanted to write something that was reflective of that persona. And the more as time progressed and I couldn't really contain my feelings and my depression, I think the writing became really messy. And I felt that I was doing things in my personal life that I was ashamed and embarrassed about, but couldn't really take back and couldn't really stop because I was just exploding from suppressing so much for so long. And I think I remember speaking to my brother and saying, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. What am I going to do? I've already said so much. I've already done so much. I've already exposed myself in a way that I'm not happy about. And then he said, you know, I think you should just go all the way, you know? If you've already said it too much, say more and just completely let go of this image that you've been holding on to, because what's happening is you're changing, but you're insisting on who you were before. And that friction is creating a rupture. So it was just to let go of whoever I thought I was and just to let whatever was becoming unfold. And I think that's what took place on the paper. Also just writing as a form of healing, not to be long-winded, but it does heal you because it listens to you. It's the only thing you have at the end of the day. And in my case, I really feel, you know, we've always talked about the fact that writing is such a lonely process. To write well, you have to read a lot, which you do alone. To write in itself, you have to be alone, which you're alone. You're just alone so much of the time. And so it really becomes your friend, your cousin, your sister. So that's kind of the relationship I've developed with it.
Okay, beautiful. I wonder if, you know, it's a book that's called The Frightened, and there's some irony in that, because from my perspective, it's one of the most fearless books I've read. And it is fearless in its searing honesty. I think that there are few writers who are brave enough to go to the spaces that you go, but also to present characters that are not easy. Your narrator, and it is framed as a semi-autobiographical relationship, so you and the narrator clearly have some kind of a close journey, so it is a kind of acknowledgement of that this narrator is at least based in some way in you and in your life. It presents, I think, a image of feminism, because I do think it's a fiercely feminist book, but it's not an easy feminism. You're not going to get affirmation. It's not like just fists in the air and girls good, men bad. There's a lot of complexity in the feminism you present. You also are incredibly vulnerable in your relationships with men, and presenting that vulnerability and presenting characters that are vulnerability, that are destroyed, in fact, by men, and that are not, you know, going to come out and, you know, their sisters come and save them in the day and everything ends happily ever after. So it's a complex vision of feminism that's presented in this book that might in some ways fly against the kind of current trends where we have a kind of a very militant feminism that's so important, but sometimes the complexities get lost in that. It also, in terms of gender relationships, presents a searingly honest and maybe unpolitically correct vision. Similarly, the narrator is not your average heroine. She's narcissistic, a liar, you know, somebody who really is not unafraid to go places and to you know, to really excavate feelings. Can you talk a little bit about the honesty in and the difficulty of writing about that, but also why you felt it was important to present these in their complexity?
There's actually a lot to unpack there. I'll start with the question of feminism. I think the most feminist aspect of this book is that it was written by a woman. It's a female voice. And so what will come out would not necessarily be either pleasant, or it won't be necessarily something that you feel empowered by. It's just empowering in the very fact that a woman is speaking in that sense. And I think what I started to feel more and more was that I didn't want to create a character that you sympathize with. I didn't even want to create a character that you villainize. I just wanted to create a human being who was perfectly flawed, and to offer the opportunity for a redemption story, because I really feel like redemption is such a male concept. It's such a male narrative, you know, and you rarely really see that idea of this is a person who lied about being raped in the midst of a crisis where many women have been raped, and that they did it for attention, you know, and that's how vile this person is. And yet this person is broken. This person has experienced sexual abuse of some kind. And so it's a lie, but it's also the truth, and that it's just not clean. And one thing I find really interesting is how a lot of the lies we tell are truths that we should have told to other people, which I find I've done a lot in my life, where I lie to someone about something that they have done or they're doing, but it's actually the truth about what someone else has done sometimes. So it's even in that sense, which I wanted to quote Anew, who was one of the hugest inspirations when I was writing the story. She says, "I would not be concerned with the secrets, the lies, the mysteries, the facts. I would be concerned with what makes them necessary."
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you there. It's a beautiful quote to end on. So I think that now is a good point to end. And the reason I'm interrupting you is because you have a wealth of questions. So I'm not going to read all the comments. There's some fantastic comments here, people highlighting things that you've said that are meaningful to them and thanking you for the beautiful reading. I'm not going to read all that because we actually only have 4 minutes left. But I'm going to go straight to the question. So please forgive me if I don't cover you or what you've said in the chat. Your comments are noted and they are appreciated, and Leto is reading them. But just to go kind of straight to the question. So does isolation aid in growth in an individual? What's your feeling on isolation? Can it be a space of growth?
I think it's a space of rehabilitation. I think it's a place you go to heal from whatever growth has taken place outside of that isolation. Like the way I like to think about life a little bit is like going to the gym when you're living, when you're interacting with people. And then isolation is the period of just your muscles healing, you know, and then you come out a bit stronger. It's like your hyperbolic time chamber.
Fantastic. Okay. And considering the merging of form and fragments and the woman, please talk about this woman, the frightened, and what room there is in a country like ours for this woman to exist.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, let me just speak about why I call it the frightened. Maybe that'll answer the question. I felt that I came up with the title before I'd even thought about the book. It just spoke to me because I felt that was a predominant state I was in part because I was a woman and in part because I was a Black person. And I think that it just really summarizes the state that we're in. It's like just frightened. My brother pointed out to me that there's something about the word frightened that feels like something that occurs to someone because of something, but also occurs in anticipation of something happening, which really feels like it encapsulates the female state of being. Oh, and room for the frightened in this country. Honestly, we're really, as a woman just walking down the street, it's impossible. You feel really scared all the time. And I feel a lot of the time that I'm not really sure how to be appealing to people that I want to appeal to while being safe from people, you know, that I don't want to appeal to.
Yeah. Who do you see this book as targeting? I mean, who do you imagine your reader is? Is that something you think about or have thought about? And who do you see as reading this book?
Hopefully not my family.
Maybe if you can just clarify very briefly why you say that.
I think especially with Black people, there's just certain things you're not supposed to talk about. And I realized that was a war I was having inside me. It was inhibiting my ability to write because it was like, you can talk openly about certain events or cultural, you know, things that have affected us, like our oppression, our political state of vulnerability. We're able to be vocal about it, but our personal affliction is something we are supposed to suppress. And I think that was like a cultural inhibition that I had in me from a very young age. And it really, you know, I had to break through that now. And I just don't know how comfortable my relatives would have with me exposing myself in that way. And it's also just this idea that you can't really expose yourself without exposing other people. So that was always a worry as well.
What do you, this is maybe a nice question to kind of close with. What do you hope your readers take away from your work, especially as it pertains to the difference in how male or female and how they may place themselves in their stories?
How males and females can place themselves in my story or their own stories?
How the differences, how it pertains to the differences in how males and female or females and how they may place themselves in their story. So maybe a difference in what you see for male readers and for female readers. How do you imagine they'll interact differently, and what will they differently take away from this book, or what do you think there is for both male readers? And to say that while I think it's a book that's going to be very easily typecast as women's reading, I think it's a powerful and important book to read for men. And to say that there are also wonderful male characters within this. And I think, you know, Lethu took us straight to the punches, and the stuff she chose to read was really a lot of the very emotive, very forceful, very broken material. But there's also fantastic moments of joy. One of my favorite scenes is you and a lover who have a race, and it's just this moment of kind of exuberant joy, and you trying to keep up with him in this play of masculinity and femininity and the different physicalities and vulnerability, but also just exuberance and joy. And it is a book full of that. There is joy and there is light and playfulness and fun in this book, and that there are also wonderful, complex, strange male characters that I'm sure many readers will relate to or not relate to, or at least know men like that in their lives. So maybe, but that's enough from me. Let's hear it from you.
Yikes. I think one thing that women can take from it is just the freedom to be able to just speak, but also just have a mirror of your experience in literature. I think that maybe something that men can take out of it is something similar to what you would feel if your dolls were to come to life. I've always been really afraid of Chucky and just dolls coming to life, because, you know, I always felt that if my teddy bear were to come to life, I don't think it would like me, you know? And it's just this idea of something that was perfectly poised and objectified and sitting there in your room, watching you the whole time. Oh, just sitting there, and then you suddenly realizing that it's watching you and that it can speak and it has opinions about who you are and what you've done and where you've put it. And that is a little bit frightening, which speaks to the title of the book. And I think that that's what men could definitely take from reading this.
Absolutely beautiful. I'm going to end it there because we're not going to get a more beautiful statement, I think, to end speaking about this book on. And a more beautiful image. As a true poet, Leto has given us an image to walk away with, which is, guys, think about it. What happens when your teddy bear comes to life? You know, and when you're interacting with the woman in your life, just bear that in mind. What happens when she starts to speak? What will you hear? How will you see yourself reflected when she starts to speak? So and a call for all women to also speak and to tell their stories and to not be afraid, not to be the frightened, to be fearless in speaking about our fright and in how we are the frightened, to be fearless in that role. I think those are beautiful things to closing notes for this, I think, seminally important book. I'm enormously excited. Leto, maybe if you can just tell us about where we're going to find it, when is it coming, because I'm sure everybody as excited as I am, and having had little tastes of it, would really like to hear a whole lot more. There were many comments saying thank you for beautiful reading, and also comments saying that an audio book needs to come out, which I think in Purple Press, I know Vangi's in the house, let's hear that as well. Because it is a book full of music. Leto, where can people find it? When will it be out? And what are the plans for the book?
So the pre-orders will be available in November, and I think the book will be released end of the year or beginning of next year. And I think more information can be found on Mbele Press's site. So if you could just tune in there, I'm sure Hear My Voice will give you guys the link. What else did you ask me? Sorry.
I'm just, where people can find the book and what the plans are for it's going kind of coming out into the world.
That's what's available at the moment. And the audiobook, yes, sorry. We will have, there will be an audio what is it called? Preview. It's not the full book, but just a small preview of it that I'm working on that will be coming out soon. And I'll be sure to let everybody know when that happens.
And I'm putting, follow Imperial Press, wonderful publisher bringing out women's book, a fierce, fiery, young publisher that deserves your support for all their book. Keep an eye out for Leto, but also buy the rest of the titles in their catalogue, because it's a really important, young, independent press that I think is also been very brave in publishing this book, and in very brave in what their choice to publish is. So a press to support and certainly to get Leto's book when it comes out. Thank you so much for the beautiful questions. Thank you everybody who has come to listen. Thank you Leto for a beautiful reading and a beautiful book, and a crucial book, I think. And most of all, also thank you to Poetry Africa for hosting us, and that Poetry Africa is hosted by the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and also to thank the National Institute Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences, the French Institute of South Africa, Total Energies, KwaZulu-Natal Department of Arts and Culture also for their support. I think any support that can be given to poetry, I still think it's our most important art form, and that yeah, anybody who supports poetry deserves a big up, and go out there and support poetry. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Lethu.
Bye.
Bye.